look at what's not really happening, that we'll have to sort of, what is it that's really creating that inertia for people to not really move up the ladder beyond mid-career levels. So yeah, that's just from my side on this.
Thanks, Pooja. Sadhika, your views?
Thanks, Anand. I sat down today and to talk with my colleagues at LYNKIT, and I have a range of people graduating from 1998 to 2022, and I just wanted to get a sense of how many fellow classmates were women. And the great news is that a lot more. So in 98, maybe it was 1 to 5% of the engineering departments or some of the electronics departments that we hire from a lot had 1 to 5% women. That of course is 30, 40, 50% now, looking at the last couple of years. So that of course is a great victory, because we are seeing more people. And if I ask on how many of those entered the workforce, almost everyone now in the last couple of years is entering the workforce in some way. But I think this is where it sort of aligns up with Pooja in terms of how many of them are staying. And I think that's where we sort of like are still losing out on. It's, the initial few years when when they're young, before, I guess, for a lot of women, they get married or they have families, they are able to stay in the workforce. And then, of course, they get out. I asked for so I have a lot of anecdotal experiences to share. A lot of people talked about their female classmates studying more or going abroad. And I think that again speaks to the fact that maybe, we aren't being able to create a conducive environment. And a lot of people are choosing, a lot of their female classmates are still choosing to go abroad and study abroad and work abroad because they do see more opportunity there. That's one part of it. The other part that I feel like I want to address is a little bit in terms of, is again a more of a supply-based constraint in terms of the environment that we have here. So I work, of course, at the intersection of supply chain and technology, but my office in Delhi is located in an industrial area, not really a glamorous area to work out of. And so when I put a job application, job requisition out, and I see the applications that are coming into me, I don't see that many female candidates applying. And there could be a couple of different reasons. So I just very recently last week put out a job requisition for a warehouse manager, and I got 1,000 applications and almost all of them were men. And I think the reason for that really is what kind of environment are we operating in? And my location plays a huge part to it. The work timings of a warehouse manager are going to be a little bit, later in the day, 12 to 9 p.m. It's a very common timing for a warehouse manager, just because that's how the logistics and the courier industry operates. Again, not conducive, because nobody wants their, daughter of their house, wife, to be traveling late at night from, sort of like a rough industrial or warehousing district in the city. So there are a lot of challenges, I think, that go beyond even being able to create an equal opportunity. I would imagine that being a business that's led by women, having an all female HR department would be conducive, or give people, the feeling that they would have equal opportunity at an organization like mine. But there is definitely a supply issue rather than a demand issue. At least that's what I feel in my experience.
Thanks, Sadhika. Ruby, your views? Do you agree with Pooja and Sadhika?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Aanand, for getting me here and in fact discussing, because I have one basic observation, is that all of this that we are talking is very, very important and critical. Why? Because these things are very, very mindset changed. So perception has to change. How will perception change? perception will change by talking more. More voices have to be heard. Everyone has to talk about it. So now let's go back to the question that you asked, that why is it so? So Pooja had some very, very good points, Sadhika also, but I would like to probably tell a little bit about just not just supply chain, but women labor force or force overall. So how many of you must have every year seen, when the board exams comes out, that girls have performed better than the boys, you see? And then my son was asking that, mom, there are so many 100 percentages, for girls, but we don't see, when your friends come over, we don't see many women there. Why? Very, very pertinent question. Why? Because if you look at the statistics of 2021 CAT examinations, everyone who has to come into a workforce generally does MBA. How many of, everyone would have done an MBA to go into the corporate leadership? But do you know the representation of women applying was 35% only to CAT? And do you know how many of them, 3 or 4, reached that 100 percentile? So you would see, everyone feels that this is the funnel, but the funnel is upside down. There is, there's not a healthy pipeline, and people say there's a leakage. People are dropping out. Yes, that's the second stage, but I feel we're not even coming there. The pipeline is broken. It's not leaking. Yes, there is a percentage which comes to the child support function. So how many of you here know a decent crash? So Indra Nui, everyone knows her, the CEO of PepsiCo, said in her book that, she needed a support system around a receptionist, not mothers and mother-in-laws, but a support system around to take care of their kids, to be able to come to work freely and to handle that businesses. So that is one perception. The last and the important point for supply chain is, supply chain is still, people think, when they think supply chain, as I said, think of transportation, you have to trucks, cargo, put it on the truck. No, it is not there. There are various levels. Multinationals have come into supply chain. So yes, that part of the job is there, but there is a managerial part, administrative, technology, everything is there. So these perception, mindset, and overall for everything, the patriarchal system and the culture of our society, perpetrated not by men, but by women also. So I would, of course, when we have the next question, we would like to focus more. Yeah, that's it on the first set of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. These are some very, very hard-hitting points, and this is what we need for today's discussion, to go deeper into what the problem is. Ruchi, do you agree with Ruby, and what are your reasons for this appallingly low rate of participation?
I agree with all the ladies here. I think they have covered almost all my points. But one thing that, I think that's the start of this challenge is that there is already such a low representation that we need more forums like this. We need to spread more awareness. You need to call us and reach out more often to us. Similarly, people like you to hear us. We are the representatives. The change starts here with me. We shouldn't wait for an HR to make a policy. And when we talk about these things, what happens is, at the end, I just hope that people don't feel that, when you're being pro-woman, you're anti-man. No, that's not the case that is happening here. When we say about policies, it's also for your wife, it's also for your mother, it's also for your sister who might come and join our workforce. So, when we are talking about and addressing the supply chain industry issues, they're an issue for everybody out there. Currently, we need to address it. That does not mean we are doing something to favor the gender. We are doing to give them the parity, to at least have decent numbers in place, to have a decent representation at all levels. So this is my first and foremost point. And my second point is, of course, the biases and preconceived notions at all levels. But this, I feel, is across industry. So my dad spent a lot of money on my MBA, and he did not let us take any loans. And I really appreciate and highly grateful for that. But when I was going for an interview, there are MBA graduates, men also, boys also, and women also, and girls also. Do you ask them that what will you do after wedding? I mean, once you get married, you don't ask these. I of course will get married to a man. Of course, I got married to a man. Why didn't you ask my husband the same question? Why aren't you asking what will you do when you become a father? Will you quit your job? Nobody asks those questions. And this, I think, when we say about biases and preconceived notions, these are very derogatory questions. You are uh, right at the start. You making me think. I'm a fresh graduate and I'm thinking, oh yeah, oh this might happen. Is it so? I never thought on those lines because I want to have. I'm very ambitious and I will manage like the father of the kid will manage, like my husband will manage. We will manage. And like I think Ruby said that Indra Nui said it takes an army to raise a village, and her army was her support system. So we have to understand the families are becoming nuclear. The women are getting educated, but what do they do? Where is the solution? These hard hitting facts, where is that village? Have we given them that? Have we created a parallel village for them? How will they raise their child? And why this question? How will a father raise the child without the support of the grandparents? We have to bring parity and break these biases not only for women but for the fathers and the men who are young men who are going to get married, young parents. In general, we are hearing so many paternity leaves. Yes, a woman alone cannot be up at the night and changing diapers and coming to work and showing up. No, it's the man also. He also has those dark circles around his eyes. So parity and notions will have to change for everybody. That's my point of view.
Wow, that's really powerful, and
Thank you.
really, and many of these points really hammered the point home. Thank you for that, Ruchi. Devi, what are your views on this?
Thanks, Anand. And so nice to hear such different views coming up. And topic is the same, but everyone has a perspective. So Anand, I come from the side of supply chain. I think Ruby mentioned that when people think supply chain, they only think of transportation. But I come from the part of supply chain which is real estate. So the warehousing, industrial part of supply chain. Now, I feel, and this is my personal experience that I'm talking of. When people look at industrial logistics within real estate as a segment, they find it extremely unglamorous. They would want to be in the retail side, residential side, commercial side, but industrial logistics is always considered to be very unglamorous because it's in the outskirts of the city. You have to travel to Bhiwandi and Chakan, and it's so the perception itself. You start off with a negative. That's one of the biggest challenges that I have faced when I've had to recruit over the last 2 years. For me personally, when I took up real estate, so I had a big career change when I moved from the Big Four to JLL, and I decided to focus specifically on real estate. The person who interviewed me was a woman, and that was a big inspiration for me, because when I see that somebody who's interviewing me who's so successful as a woman, I feel that, okay, if she can do it, I can do it as well. And that's why it's so important to have women at the top. It's not, we talk of frontline managers, we talk of supervisors, where we still manage to achieve that, some bit of gender parity. But when it comes to the C-suite level, it gets extremely tough. And somebody just spoke of how we have so much of attrition at the middle level. And, by the time we reach the top, it's really negligible. I think it's very important to ensure that the growth is sustained, because when there are more women at the top, more women will feel inspired to join the workforce as well. So that is one experience of mine. I also want to kind of, speak of another personal experience of mine. I also feel a lot of times when it comes to recruiting, the general perception is to have somebody with relevant experience. Nobody wants to really take the onus and the responsibility of training, mentoring, getting somebody who does not have the relevant experience but has the ability to step up to the role. For me, that's one thing that I really look at. I look at skills. I don't look at relevant experience. So if I feel that somebody has the skills, for me, that person is a check. But that's not the case, and therefore we see that once we put a filter of relevant experience, we're not going to get women at all. They're all going to be filtered out. That's a big change that I feel is required in perception. A lot of times women are recruited only because the manager has to adhere to diversity goals of an organization, and not because he genuinely believes and sees the merit in hiring women. And when that happens, when you hire somebody only to meet your diversity goals, when it comes to axing, they are the first people who get axed as well. And I've personally seen this, where there were only 2 girls in a group in one of my previous organizations. And when both of them, the conditions were created where both of them had to leave, there was no attempt made to retain them. So this is a big challenge. I think, in summary, I think, you have to get women at the top, create that inspiration for women to know that, yes, they can do it as well, and have a general change in the perception when it comes to recruiting and hiring, so that you are more open to take the responsibility to train people without the relevant experience, so long as they have the fire in the belly and they're able to step up and take onus of the work. That's my 2 bits on this.
Thank you, Devi. That was very well articulated. It really helped the panel move to the next question, and there are so many questions that come out of the first round of discussion that we had. Overall, from the first question, the things that emerged were that the reasons that are responsible for such a low participation of women is one, perception, the other is mindset, and there is cultural biases, preconceived notions, lack of role models or mentoring, and lack of creating that inspiration for other women. Now, I want to stay a little longer in this question and stay at the level of the overall workforce. And I'll start with Pooja on this one. Is that, Pooja, in the last 5 years, I mentioned in my intro, 9 crore women came to the workforce, and I'm talking about the overall workforce. And you spoke about various data points about this, that they joined the workforce and then they left. What is it that they experienced? Obviously, this is very generic and something very sweeping, but we're just hanging on to the nails in order to understand what is really ailing our workforce, our work culture, or our workforce environment. So 90 million women came to the workforce and they left. They experienced something that was not conducive to what they wanted. So what exactly is going wrong in the overall workforce environment that is discouraging our women?
Sure, Anand, it's a very pertinent question, and again, a very strong one. And it's linked to what Rubi and Devi had also mentioned. So if you see what's really happening, one, that while you're growing up your career ladder as women, there is a certain support mechanism that's required at a personal level and at a professional level for you to sort of move. And that is not skill set. That is one, mental conditioning that you need, that you can move up, which can be helped through better representation. And secondly, what really impacts is the socio-cultural implication of the kind of environment we are accustomed to. When we as women are told that you have to manage your jobs, you have to manage, manage your children, manage the home core, you are pressurized enough and more than what a man would undergo. Yeah, and you're asked to do that along with delivering impeccably in your work as well. And that is where at a certain level you will stretch, move up, but after a certain point you burn out. And that is where the maximum attrition happens. I'll just give you very simple statistics again, because numbers really make a difference. If you see the number of the amount of work a woman does when it comes to, say, childcare, it is 3 times the work that a woman does in comparison to what men does. When it comes to home chores, it is double the work that a man would do, apart from the office job that a woman has to do. So it's 6 jobs that a woman would have in comparison to what a man would have. That's the level of pressure they have to deal with. And that is where we need that support system. That, There is diversity. You represent. It's absolutely fine. There has to be inclusion as well. It cannot be just a diversity and equity phenomena. It has to be a diversity, equity, inclusion phenomena. You have to make women feel that they're part of the workforce. The other reason, I feel where there is this mental conditioning that a woman probably might be less competent than a man. Sometimes we are unheard because we come from a different gender. I think there are different set of biases that stay, and it will only be broken when we have that support system for us to be comfortable enough to move up the career ladder, to be able to have better representation, to be able to say that there are role models up there, whom we can look up to and definitely reach. And then when that representation is strong enough, people will have that mental conditioning that when women speaks, that also has got merit and has got an equal level of weightage in comparison to that of men. And that is where that mental conditioning starts to happen. So I think that's my take on what's really happening. And because it's something that I have seen probably, in last 5-6 years in the industry. I mean, there are subtle things which really make an impact, but need to be definitely worked on.
Pooja, can you throw a little bit more light on this part? And I would ask other speakers also to do the same. Is that, see, a lot of these cultural mores, expectations, conditioning, a lot of these things, as appalling as they are also common with our neighbors. We have in common with our neighbors like Bangladesh and even Pakistan, Sri Lanka. There the participation rates, and we're talking about data from ILO, which is common, which uses common parameters for all these countries. So it's not like the data itself is wrong or something like that. So they have a much higher participation rate, even though they share a lot of these factors that we have just cited with our country. What is it over and above that is ailing our workforce?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's very intriguing. And I was reading a report where it was, mentioned that there is a lag that our industry already has. So while we have started off on this journey to bringing in more women into the workforce, there is a lag that we have in comparison to our neighbors, in comparison to West, and in comparison to the globe. And while we are running at a higher pace, the gap is significant enough for us to bridge. So it will take us time to sort of, really mitigate that. A 20% representation of women in workforce in comparison to that of a 48% around the globe shows that significant gap. So I think that's where we'll have to understand that it's a lot of stuff that needs to be done to be able to bridge that gap.
So even with our neighbors who got independence at the same time, where women joined the workforce, where industrialization or proto-industrialization, which is the stage before industrialization, also happened at somewhere around the same time. So that is really intriguing. So I do take your point on the lag of joining the workforce. And I take this question to Sadhika as to what your views are on this question.
I think for me, through my journey, my perspectives have changed a lot. I, of course, started off working in a very large consulting company. Now, of course, I'm a business owner, so I feel like my perspective is very different now than it was then. And the point that I always struggle with, and it's not something I thought about before as a woman initially. I was, of course, when I started off in my career, I ended up being in transportation, totally by accident. It wasn't really planned, but that's where I ended up. I was one of the very few women in my company as a whole, but the only woman on my team. And I had very different perspective at that time. Now, fast forward to when I'm a business owner, the thing that I really struggle with is this equal opportunity and what exactly that means. In being able to create a conducive environment, like, for example, the industries where I see that women's participation is a lot higher are industries that can offer a lot of flexibility in the workspace. And that means like being able to work from home, having flexible timings, maybe where your leaves are not counted or measured in the same way as they would be in other industry sectors. which is why in the IT industry, there's a lot more women participation than other industries. It's because that industry intrinsically can offer a lot more flexibility than others. And I think it again keeps going back to the point of like, how much support do you have from your community, from your families? And I think that's the underlying theme here, is how much support do you have from your family, from society, to be able to not, to be able to be like, hey, I have a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 6 job that I have to go in for every day, and if there is an issue, then I'm not the first person calling in that I can't come into work today, and it has to be somebody else. That requires a support system, which I feel like a lot of which is lacking. And then from a business owner perspective, when I'm looking at my team, and I'm not even talking about hiring anymore, but if I look at my team from the perspective of even evaluating performance, how do I try and make it a level performance metric that I can measure every individual, irrespective of their gender, from the same performance metric? And so if attendance was one of them, or timings was one of them, then how can I keep the playing field level? And I think that's what I struggle with now, is how do I create an equal opportunity for people of not just, I wouldn't even say of different genders, but just different people coming from different walks of life. How do I keep a very standard performance metric that doesn't discriminate against anyone, but also gives everyone an equal opportunity? And I think that sort of is the challenge, that I sort of never saw that from the other side when I was the one being measured. But as the person now in charge of the measuring, that's something that I truly feel like is a challenge that comes from the other side. And it's really given me a very different perspective. Is now it's definitely something, even today, I spoke with people from my team who come from very different sectors. I spoke with the engineers from computer science stream, or the engineers from core engineering and mechanical electronics, and then spoke with people who came from other degrees, the non-engineering degrees as well. And everyone just has, it's very different. It varies a lot from sector to sector in terms of what people are seeing. And women's participation in IT for that reason has been really high, just because their performance metric is not based on physical presence, versus in some other industries, physical presence does matter a lot, and it's just the way that the work is done. And I think that's just something that we generally have to work on as a group of people, to try and figure out how can we make the playing field really level and really create equal opportunity for everyone, without having to change, how can we have standard performance metrics for people to be measured?
That's a very important point, Sadhika, equal opportunity. And hold on to that thought, because we're going to revisit this in our next question about workplace environment. Now, but I want to stay a little longer with other panelists about the same question, that Ruby, why do we do so badly, even compared with our neighbors on this score?
Anand, I think, see, one of the major, our friend said about the same thing, is the mindset. One, second is that conditioning. And, I think, I haven't got figures for this, but maybe India is a growing economy. So, men, 70% of the men that are there are earning better. So what happens is, we've raised our girls not to be very mentally strong and always have to be very submissive. So what happens is that mental strength, which comes with the combative challenges, maybe is not there. And at the first stroke of a challenge, they move out. So I will just, share an example here. I read Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook, said, when she was just a normal employee, not the CEO, she was, the family way, and she had to park her car very far off from the building, and she had to walk. So 2 or 3 days later, she went and she asked our boss that I want a parking near because we don't have to walk. So maybe, you know, this is the reason. I'm not very 100% sure, but that we don't ask for a lot of things. So what happens is we think in the terms of equality, you know, like I don't like my chair to be pulled because I feel no, we're standard. I'm a working professional. Why should anyone pull my chair? So maybe out of that pressure of equality, we don't ask for things which as women we need, you know, like example, if you're pregnant lady, you don't have to walk. It is just a special, we feel it's a special thing, although it is not, and we are actually caught in that guilt of you know, asking. And then things like this happen in the workplace, you know, and in general, again, you know, you have patriarchy, your voice is not heard, you have to speak a little louder, you have to be average, you're not getting flexible. And the burden of that unpaid work where you are responsible for your elderly, you know, mother-in-law, father-in-law, your son, is actually pushing women down, and hence they are caught up in that bottom. So the few that you feel are, you know, have moved away, have actually spoken and maybe had that mental strength to combat that. Let them speak. You know, like I'm a female driver and people sneer at me. I say it is okay. I mean, I don't mind it. So I've actually let them go away and I still drive. So people who've probably driven and gone ahead, but yeah, mostly because we did not get that kind of, so the basis is basically, you know, the parents, the family need to get their women. And maybe in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, you know, it's not, the economy is not that big, so everyone has to participate for that money and bread and butter. So maybe the numbers, but I tell you, the numbers are starking, you know, and I think thank you for it, because I was under the impression things are improving. You know, I did not know that it was
They're really
really
bad.
bad.
They're really bad. They're really bad, and we are only better than like 4 or 5 countries in the world, which are, and all of these countries which are do worse than us are either strifed on, or these are war zones. They're in complete shambles, and ours is the only country
Yeah,
in those ranks.
even in Africa, Anand, I
Yeah,
was seeing that ILO map only because of this event, and I'll tell you, I saw numbers. You know, that gender gap was highest here, and you had, even in Africa. I went and I wanted a country which was actually, you know, like not the Middle East, but in Africa there are countries like Moldova having better gender gaps than us. So
so true. And we don't speak about this because we already are facing too many crises, a lot of them self-made, and a lot of them blown up, and a lot of them made by men, if I may say so. um, so I have also thought about this, and I would want other speakers, and I'll go now to Ruchi and Devi, but other speakers are also welcome to weigh in on this. Is that, what is unique to India, in comparison with our neighbors? Why is it so bad in India, even though we share a lot of cultural similarities with our neighbors, but it is so unique? I think personally is that because of our diversity. So it is a boon, but it is a curse also, because we have been fettered, constrained into our own little silos for such a long time. And when we have to go to a common place, to a workforce, then the rules are not eked out. They are not written as to how to deal with people from different communities, from different faiths, from different backgrounds. This is not a problem with Bangladesh or Nepal or Sri Lanka or Pakistan. Their populations are lot more homogeneous than ours. So our boon, our blessing is diversity, but in this situation it becomes a curse, is what I personally feel. And I want Ruchi and Devi and other speakers to also speak on this part. Have they felt this issue as well? Ruchi?
So I will take forward first what Pooja and Sadhika mentioned, that so let us assume there are 2 players in the professional field who are due to be promoted to next level. And one of them, female, does 6 jobs like Pooja mentioned, comes to office on time and leaves on time. Would you promote that professional, or would you promote person who comes in late but sits in till the time the lights are off and goes for a drink after and then goes home? You have the answer. You don't have to answer that. And we all know that what I feel, what Sadhika mentioned, what has a gender got to do with somebody's efficiency? What has the role that she is going to be a mother or she's going to get married? Why these questions in mind? I mean, in the first place, you have to understand the judging parameters have to be neutral. You have to only talk work. We are going virtual. We are no longer going to be sitting in the office, maybe not now, but 5 years, 10 years from now. You can't say that, oh, I didn't get to see your face, or you look so drained out because you're a new mother. No, you credit her for showing up, still considering that your work is very important, that her work is very important. You don't say she looks haggard. You say you applaud her for coming, showing up, dressing up, and being there fighting it out like any other professional. That is where I think, like Sadhika mentioned, the parity has to start from the measures. It has to be same. It cannot be anything but work, efficiency, ROI. The numbers that you've given her or him, even to male managers, if you're judging them, you don't judge them how close you are to one person or how presentable the other person is. No, you just talk about numbers. You just talk about the business they get to you. You just talk about the relationships they have with their customers, not with me, not as a manager. I don't want you to have a relationship with me at all. Please do your work and go back home. I don't want to even want you to call me. But yeah, get your numbers, get your work done, meet your deadlines, and be happy, stay happy. Let everybody be happy. This is, I think, one needs to ponder. It is when you say about Bangladesh, it's not as patriarchal as India is. The women workforce and the garment industry is so well. Now here also you go back to what, we have been asked to put a button and we know how to stitch, and that needle and thread has done wonders for the garment industry. Every village probably has a garment industry running in themselves. Somebody is fixing buttons, somebody is fixing collars, and somebody is putting up the sleeves. So either we figure that out, that what works for us, because clearly one size will not fit all. But yes, something will work and the changes will happen. And we have to become very, very neutral. Talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity will not help. It has to start from my mindset. Even as women, there are times when I get 10 resumes, we have to take a chance. We have to fight it out. That no, I want to give this person a fair chance. Let me do it. Sometimes we take a back seat, like Ruby mentioned, that we've been taught, okay, the person is going to report into someone else. Why should I push? No, you have to push because you believe in them. And it's okay if they don't perform because they are new. We have to defend them also. It's okay. That is how we get them.
I'm not sure I got what you meant.
All right.
So that is all my 2 cents here.
Wow, these are some brilliant insights, Ruchi, and very well put, that they remind me also, and they make me also introspect and retrospect as to how things were back when I was in a large organization. Now I do editing for different organizations, but in media, as you know, it has the participation is quite high from women, and we have to mentor and nurture the abilities of young journalists, for example. So we interact a lot with women, with girls who come from different parts of the country, who want to become, who are starry-eyed, who want to become journalists and TV anchors, who want to go into these roles. And they're very, very aspirational and ambitious. It's good to see. So I'm just trying to think back as to how these things used to happen. So I have a comment on that, which is why I went back into this thing, is that, so at a higher level, it is true, especially back when everybody used to work in a brick and mortar office in an offline setting, that as you go higher up the strata, you would have to become disagreeable. You would have to indulge in a lot of politicking, who you're close to. A lot of backslapping would happen. And women obviously would feel left out. And I could see that. I could see that they had the ability, they wanted to make a difference, but they cannot get into, a water cooler talk with men, for example. So these are very stark reasons, and quite something that needed to be pointed out. So thank you for that. Devi, your points, your views on that.
So Anand,
Sadhika?
I definitely agree with you. India, when we compare ourselves to our neighbors, India, the dynamics of India are very different from Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. We are very diverse, and when I say diverse, it's not just diversity. The economies of different states, what different states are focusing on in terms of their in terms of agriculture, industrialization, services, everything is very different, and therefore I think it's very difficult to compare ourselves with somebody like with a country like Bangladesh, which is predominantly textile oriented, which as an industry is more conducive for females to work, and female labor participation could be higher, or tourism in Sri Lanka, where again female labor participation can be higher. As compared to that, I feel India's dynamics are very different. I also feel over the last 75 years, since we've become independent, we have had to go through a lot of social changes in gender biases. So from female infanticide to today, we have gone through a lot, and like Pooja mentioned at the start, there's been a huge lag in women even entering the workforce. So I think there's a lot of ground for us to cover before we can, even achieve this gender parity. Which I don't think have been issues in our neighboring countries, So we've had to overcome a lot of social biases, social customs, which have been very very anti-women, and very anti the progress for women. So I think that's been one of the key factors, which is very different, which puts India on a very different footing as compared to our neighbors. And but again, diversity I feel is for the better as well, because it gives us the edge as compared to our neighbors. We have people in services industry, we have people in industries now. When I visit an Amazon warehouse or a Flipkart warehouse, I see that the entire the fit outs, the internal layouts are all made very conducive for women, and there are so many women who are making entries to go inside the warehouse, and it makes me feel very happy that we are at least making the change to ensure that we are able to encourage women participation.
Great insights. Now we move to the second question finally, which is about the workplace. And we talk specifically now about the supply chain workplace, which is what this whole theme was about. Now I'll start with Pooja again as to how do you find the workplace environment in supply chain, whether it is the corporate offices, and specifically and especially the warehouses and the field work. How do you find them conducive to women? If not, what are the key areas? What are the areas which need to be improved? Pooja?
Sure, Anand. It's a difficult one. But if I have to start with, if I take my personal experience, it's been a pretty comfortable journey for me. I have had a factory experience for roughly 2 years, and over there is where I sort of understood or experienced what probably could be difficulty that could exist in supply chain. So I'll relate to that experience, because otherwise it's been corporate stints for me. If you see, what really happens is when there are jobs which are on the field, the expectation from the role, there has to be degenderization of the roles firstly. That you can't really classify, that this is a role that you can't really do, and this is a role that, probably comfortable and hence can be given, because that again narrows the funnel. So the entry again becomes very narrow. The scope reduces.
It's a brilliant point. Yes, great point.
So I think when that happens, that's there in place, then it is easier for us to sort of be comfortable firstly. And right now that still exists. So I think that is one pain point that I have, that you'll have to really look at roles as gender neutral. If you're deploying workforce, either make them capable enough to manage it, because it's not to do with genders. I mean, every gender has got a pro and a con. I mean, there's different quality that a gender would bring on the table, and you need to capitalize. If there's a skill set that is lacking, then train. I mean, that is the solution, and not a bias. Secondly, environment, when it comes to managing roles which are at a managerial level or at a senior managerial level, what is really lacking is, hello, yeah, am I audible?
Absolutely, Pooja. Please go on.
Sorry. Yeah, when we talk about roles which are at managerial, mid-managerial, and senior levels, it's probably not the environment. I feel it's the opportunity. It's the opportunity to grow and really see that the candidate is capable enough to grow. And second, a development opportunity. You need to really have, tailored leadership development programs in the organizations, senior leadership really calibrating their efforts to have the inclusion in the workforce. And how is it panning out? And see if the efforts are really making any sense. And if not, then fine-tuning that again and again. So that is where the workforce will be conducive for growth for women. And women will want to stay here right now if they feel that, a man is getting a better pay, a man is being promoted more frequently, or is being paid higher than a woman. Of course, that's inertia, right? Of course, that's a reason for a woman to step back, lean back, and not lean in. So I think that's the difference. That's where the environment will be made conducive. We'll have to think on fronts of tailoring leadership programs. We'll have to think on fronts of degenderizing the roles. I think these two very strongly from me. Yeah.
Wow, that's a powerful point. Degenderizing or not stereotyping the roles.
Yeah.
That's an awesome point. And that reminds me of the work environment that we have in the developed economies, for example. And that takes me to Sadhika. And everyone has had international experience, and also Sadhika. Sadhika, you worked in the US for many years. Do you feel that this could be one of the major differences that you see over there?
I'm actually going to say, again, in the office, I would say, yes, a lot of female participation. But again, I've also had experience in the transportation sector, not a lot of female truck drivers in America either. So there are certain, I think degenderizing certain positions or roles, I think that is, that's a global challenge. Yes, okay. So I would say Uber, or, in America, you also have Lyft. So of course that sort of helped in that process because it became generally more accessible and more people could get into the driving sector, for example. We also talked about, I think Devi mentioned the warehousing in, an Amazon, having really good facilities and allowing the, the participation and entry of women in there. Again, those are, so I feel like there are certain roles still that I think globally it has been challenging to degenderize just because of the facilities that are made available or the requirements of that particular position. And in that way, I feel like America very similar to the case in India as well. In other places, yes, different. But I think, I think what's interesting is, so I was polling the women in my office today in terms of what was the number one thing that they cared about when joining an organization, and they said having other women. And it wasn't other women in a leadership role, but it was having other women, female colleagues. And so there's this, and I thought oh, that means strength in numbers. So I was just thinking about, for example, in Delhi, they had the first ever all women petrol pump. So it was one of them, which was all women who worked there. And I thought that started it, and they created this all female workplace. I still don't go get petrol filled in my car and see more female attendants at any of the other places. But there is something about strength in numbers that I think that, you know, women in general feel like they don't want to be the only one. And of course, there are trailblazers, and by no means there are always exceptions to the rule. But there is, I think, this general feeling that they want that sense of community in a workplace with their colleagues. And I think that if we can sort of try and creating, I think that sort of made me think about like, if there is a position that I want to hire for that is very male dominated, I need to think about hiring maybe 3 or 4 women together, and maybe I'll have more success that way. But that's basically been, you know, that was sort of like eye-opening for me, because that's, again, I always thought about having, you know, whether it was having role models or what kind of facilities would be available or certain jobs attract a certain kind of people. But I think it is that if we can have, you know, even if it is sort of limited, in the context that we can create maybe little workplaces that can be all female, I think that there is a way that you can degenderize a certain role by just having strength in numbers.
Thank you. That's very informative, Sadhika. Ruby, what are your thoughts on the workplace environment, and also share with us the facilities that you see usually in the supply chain industry? Are they conducive? Are they welcoming for women?
Yeah, hi, thanks. So I think you know, we've reached some levels. There are people, and it is because of those some of the policies. So again, for me, I think I was privileged enough to find good working conditions. But yes, again, I did see that you know, there is one major striking from my perspective, which I felt that I saw my, you know, female colleagues drop out of the workforce, was that, you know, I mentioned again, was the child support system. You know, there are, although I saw that there's a policy in the Indian government for having creches creche for children, but I don't think, you know, that's one thing which I have not seen. But yesterday, you know, in Chennai, I went to a very neighboring, and I saw there was this, you know, a lot of female workforce and a crash there. I was very happy, but of course that was the first. So you can understand that, you know, and I've been visiting across the country. So if I saw for the first time, I think, you know, that is one of the major reason. Apart from that, of course, you know, as everyone mentioned, I would also like to, you know, again mention and say that the growth opportunity should be very transparent. You know, it should not be based on biases, relationship, so that I should know that this is what I want to get in. Again, pandemic has actually given a very, I would say that's a wonderful thing, is that, you know, those flexible working hours, you have your babies, you know, not well, etc. But that doesn't mean that if I go and look at, you know, take care of my baby, I am not skilled enough to get that job again, you know, in that particular frame of time. I'm more productive. So yes, we have warehouses. So now companies across, you know, like my company has done a lot of that for our you know, female employees, and not just to add to that diversity. Guys, I would like to, you know, probably tell everyone is that, you know, there are statistics which shows that when women is there in the labor force, you know, the country is doing very well. The economies, the GDPs are increasing. Plus, we all know, you know, there's this very old-fashioned thinking is that your mothers are actually the teachers of your next generation. You have a working, independent mother, the child, the next generation follows that. So there is a very, very, you know, pertinent need of actually getting the women in the workforce, not just to show that, you know, I have a ratio of 5:3, but yeah, the organizations have seen, you know, my organization has seen what women leaders in the pandemic could, you know, give to their team leaders, and the team was more intact. And my boss, actually the managing director, saw the kind of productive revenues increasing, you know, because of that. So yes, that is there. The child support has to be more, and policies have to come out of the paper and be practical and utilized, because we have a lot of things written, but nothing is done. And of course, role models are very important, you know. So we need more role models. So we need more women, so that I looked up to someone and I moved ahead. Someone should probably look up to me and move ahead and say, hey, it's just a phase, you know, and we will go across and we will overcome that.
Ruby, speaking of the pandemic, do you feel that during the pandemic, uh, work boundaries were moved around and pushed a bit by the seniors and the colleagues, and has that been a negative impact on the way women work in this industry?
I did read some reports of, you know, that the women in the pandemic, when at work, when at home, had to actually do that home course as well as, you know, the work force. But I in fact saw some practical examples of working mothers who were near their, you know, young babies, and were able to, without any you know, thought of will my son or daughter be good, and actually work more, you know, freely and provide that. And I feel that, you know, people should not take, like, this is one example which I would actually disagree when everyone says de-genderization. No, we have some strength, and, you know, the empathy that we bring, productivity, the you know, that strength that 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 only a woman can provide needs to be there. I don't need to degenderize. You know, I have my strengths. I am more, you know, I show more empathy. I, there is an emotional quotient, which is all the more important. And we've seen, you know, in Harvard Business Reviews, how emotional quotient is required. It's not only numbers and IQ. You know, I can crack a that test or a engineering test. So yes, I felt from my personal experience that, you know, it was more productive. We saw that flexible hours. Why did we not take a women candidate? Because we thought she will not stay late. You know, this is one example. When we hire an air cargo manager, you know, in a region, we feel that the person will not stay late, will not be able to go to the airport, will not go to the customs. You know, these are still biases. You know, ladies and gentlemen, 21st century we are there, but it still is there. But yes, I saw that, you know, if you give them flexibility to take care of their family, because a work-life balance is important. You know, we are, after all, still mothers also. And so if we give them, they will give, and they are more loyal. I have seen, you know, an employee who we gave flexibility in my early years, were stayed in the organization for 15 years, because she was indebted to the fact that when she needed that support, the company provided that support to them. So I have a little different, but I'm sure I have seen it practically working. And one more thing is that we don't need more sponsors. You know, we need more advocates, you know, for people to lift us up. When I have a team member who's actually thinking of moving out of the workforce, we have that ability to go and say, hey, it's just a phase, be there, things will be okay. So I'm a little optimist in that term, but yeah, of course, I think it's because of the workforce around.
Thank you, Ruby. They're all great points, and God knows that women are more emotionally resilient than men. There's no doubt about it. Ruchi, what are your views on this?
So I think well said, Ruby. We grow by lifting others. And, you know, like Ruby also said that I don't take an air cargo person because, you know, she might not stay late. But the challenge was, or still is, to address why they are not staying late. Why have we not made the roads safe enough? Why is our commutation not in place? Why is she getting hassled that an Uber will not come? Why will she have to call her husband or her brother to pick her up? We have the safe haven has to extend from our home to the office to the entire country. That is the why has to be addressed. And yes, we are in 2022. So yeah, we have to, you know, these things are spine chilling that we still in the same dealing with the same issues which we were doing, I mean, probably 2 decades earlier. This has to change now. This is the biggest, I think, problem. Second thing, where the training issues, I think Sadhika mentioned, I think one of the panel members mentioned, that training, I mean, if you ask me a three idiot style answer to what supply chain is, it is just movement of goods. It is not a rocket science. So it is not that difficult. I came in from a retail background. I had no experience of supply chain, but it is really, if I can do it, anyone can. So just find out what those nuances are, what those terminologies are, and it's just point A to point B, tons and TUs. So it's not that big a training issue also. We can bring in people from different, and I'm not saying only women. Maybe when we bring, like you said, media is, there is, female forces are in great numbers there. Bring in some media people, bring in the media people in admin, bring in the media people in service industry people can do well. And they already know how to deal with customers. Their customer relationships is very strong. So bring in those people, give them a chance. It can be anybody. And uh, the last point is that we have to show everybody the future. I think people are missing out. The women are missing out on the opportunity due to these preconceived notions. Like Ruby said, in my organization, have very good policies in place, and there are no issues that I touch wood face, and that's a great thing. So we need to, break this, bring in more awareness, and show them what you have an entire industry. The some people might, they did ask me that there are no women there. Why do you want to join? Precisely, this is the reason why I want to join. So when they come in, they will see the opportunities. There are no limits, and we need that, the strength of women, not only strength in numbers, like Ruby said, that there is so much that we bring to the table, especially when I come from the creative side. There is so much color, vibrancy, and different, because I deal with 6 jobs a day. There is so much that I can bring to the table, that, not only in terms of these issues, but in terms of work, how to manage your work better, how can we be more productive, how can we be more efficient, how can I take these flexibilities and still perform better. So I think everybody in pandemic did good numbers, but we are still saying, when we come back, if we are still facing these gender related issues and still asking these questions, why is somebody coming in this or going out at that? Sorry, not done. By this is high time, we need to stop here, and we all need to see the future. As a man, we need to see that tomorrow, if my daughter grows up and I'm a part of a supply chain industry and she wants to become like me, I should be proud. I should make that place conducive enough for her to, feel proud. Oh, I work in the same industry as my father. That is what the future motivation that I want the men and women to advocate for.
Just at this point, Ruchi, and I'll ask other speakers also to add to this, is that, if we could go to the lower strata or the entry level positions, and especially at the warehouse level or the field jobs, what do you think? How do you think the situation is for women to join that kind of workforce? Because as I shared with you, a lot many women left the workforce during the pandemic. And this is the strata where women are not participating actually in supply chain. When you come to the corporate jobs, we do find women. But what is the situation in the warehouse? What is it in the field? Can you tell us about that, Ruchi?
So a lot of women left the workforce and stayed at home, but a lot of men advocated to go back, because when you step in our shoes, you realized, oh God, I can't do this. I don't know how you do all this and still do your Zoom call from one end and teaching your kid from the other ear. I mean, I also have got only 2 years, but it was difficult. I think for men, it was all the more difficult. And I think it showed them a much needed reality, that there is so much that we already are going through. So it will be nice if we, no, like I said earlier also, that being pro-woman does not mean I'm being anti-man. And here I want to again reiterate the issue that discussions like these should not mean ki, oh, they're going to get much more perks. Why should I even hire them in the first place? So this happened, when 6-month maternity law came, people thought, oh, only 3 months was long enough. Now you're giving them 6 months. So let me not even hire somebody. Let me hire them when they have had their maternity breaks. So, this is not a deterrent. You have to understand, like Ruby pointed out, we will have many more loyalists if we give them the space to grow, if we grow with them.
I didn't understand that.
If we grow with them. So this is something.
I think I missed something.
Sorry for this. You may carry on with the other panelists. I'll just.
No worries, no worries. Devi, your views on this?
So Anand, I mean, I haven't worked in a factory, and I haven't worked in that environment. So from a physical facility perspective, it's difficult for me to speak about. But I can tell you that in the field that I come from, which is investment banking, it's for industrial logistics. Every time I sit in a boardroom, it's probably like me with a room full of men, and it's sometimes very challenging, and it can be to your advantage, but a lot of times it is very challenging as well. And this may not necessarily be for supply chain, but it's in a lot of industries, women do go through this kind of a challenge. Sometime last year, I remember the World Economic Forum had listed about 17 sustainable development goals. And one of them was gender equality. And they also specifically emphasized that gender equality was central to all the other 16 goals. And they said that if gender equality is not achieved, none of the other goals will be achieved. So that's how important gender equality is placed by the World Economic Forum for economic growth. And I feel that that inherent sense of creating the gender parity has to come about in the policies of every corporate. Like I did my MBA from the University of Chicago, and I was just speaking to one of my batchmates yesterday night, who's working in one of the largest global technology companies in US. And he said he's right now on a paternity leave, and they have a 4 months paternity leave. And this is my biggest pet peeve, actually. We always speak of gender equality, and we say that, we want to create a conducive policy for women. So I'm increasing my maternity leave from 3 months to 6 months. And I'm also creating a back to work policy that, we can get the women back to work in a very seamless way after 6 months. But why do that? Why don't you, if equality is actually about creating as much of paternity leave as a maternity leave, let the man take equal responsibility at that time? Why should it be so weighted against women? So this is something that I feel that we have to change the way we look at gender equality. It can't be just saying that we are getting things easier for women. No, it's not the case. But you have to actually create the same kind of policies for both men and women. And I think that's something that for me is a big thing that I look at. I haven't heard of any organization in India that gives a 3 or 4 months paternity leave. And I would love to see the reaction of men. If you say that take 3 months off and come back, what would they say? What would they do? I would love to see the reaction. I would love to know if organizations have the courage to bring about this policy change. I think those are the things that needs to be done. And I think it requires a fundamental change of thinking. It's not a cookie cutter change in the policy that you bring about. It needs a fundamental change. And I don't see this happening very soon. I think it needs a lot of courage, a lot of guts, and it needs like few large companies making that first step, giving the first mover lead in thinking this way, and bringing about this change. So that's from a corporate policy perspective is where I think a lot of change needs to come about. At the grassroots level, I have personally seen a lot of things changing. Because like I said, when I visit these warehouses, I feel happy with the number of women that I see, making an entry, getting in, doing their jobs. I think with automation coming in, there's a lot of the physical work that was required, which was always considered to be a little bit more intimidating for a woman. With a lot of automation coming in warehousing, industrial, I think that is also getting addressed at the grassroots level. And we need to keep focusing on those as well to keep ensuring that there's enough women participation at different strata of, the work supply chain, whether it's at the middle level, entry level, top level. I think there, different kind of policy changes are required at each level, and one needs to think about it a little bit deeper.
Thanks, Devi. This is a very riveting discussion, and I wished it would go longer than this. Now we only have about 10 minutes, and my last question to all the panelists would be to list out your top 3 or 4 measures that could help increase workforce participation for women. I'll start with Pooja.
So if I have to just quickly, give an elevator pitch here, I think it will be one, tailored leadership programs for people, creating a representation with inclusion, where, it gives us the comfort that there's an achievement that someone has accomplished, which is achievable by us too, if you aspire to be there. So I think representation matters at senior levels where it is currently very meager. And I think the first point of really training people and creating those tailored leadership programs is going to really help. And I think, thirdly, what I'll suggest, and I feel that it's also to do with our peers. So when you have got, of course, your support system, but when you have got organizations, coming in and pitching and having faith and confidence that you are able to do that, when there are men who are going to vouch for the work that you do and have the faith and confidence that you can do it probably better than them, it's a confidence booster. So I think that environment is something, if we can have, that's conducive for us to sort of move forward. So I think these 3 points from my side.
Excellent points there, Pooja. Sadhika, your points?
Yeah, challenging to put it in 3. I would say the first thing would be just to have maybe trying to create those very standard sort of cost of hiring or having female versus male staff at the company. I think that we talked a lot about if men, for example, if women have a 6 months maternity leave, I mean, if the cost of hiring sort of goes up, right? It's an added expense for a company looking to hire. If we can sort of equalize those, I think that would really make the job for anyone looking to hire easier, because you are then comparing more like profiles and more similar in the sense of cost of hiring. I think more standardized performance metrics that can go beyond, physical presence or timings or anything, and sort of that can really get to the root of, performance efficiency and so on. And the third, I would say, is maybe not something that perhaps I can do alone, but I feel like generally in terms of, it sounds like everyone individually is creating really good facilities within their own private organizations to make it more conducive for women. And I think the part that's kind of lacking is, getting home or being out on the road or doing those field jobs. And I think that's sort of, I think the third aspect that's really required is how do we create safe corridors for people to get from home to work, because I think as women, everyone on this panel has contributed in some way to create a conducive work environment for women within their organization and within the safe compounds of their 4 walls. But I think that the next step is really going to be is to try and create safe corridors for people to get around, or for people in the field to really feel that same sense of security that they would within their own organization or home.
Some very, very great points, Sadhika. Thank you so much. Ruby?
Yes, of course. So now that we are nearing the end, just a couple of things that, we as everyone can do here is, one, we start with the basic, which is societal mindset. So, the societal mindset in the sense that everyone, the families start supporting their daughters and the female, and then things will change. The second is amplify your voice. And I'm telling you, we can actually have hundreds of excuses. He's not doing that this person is not. We have to amplify our voices. When the voices are heard, Then noise is made, policies change, and reform and policies are very, very important, and that is why, everyone says, why does an organization grow more? Because it's top down. The guy has the top man has the vision. So when the country's policy makers come together, make a vision for really getting the economy up, not forgetting the women in the workforce, but if they only think of the vision of getting the economy, the GDP up, they will feel that the women needs there. Third is, there's one thing we did not talk about is, there's a clear lacking of sisterhood. Women lift other women. We have seen it's not happening. And technically, because of the cultural mindset, there's this envy, jealousy. But we see that brotherhood there, a male friend will recommend another male friend. I don't know how many people that have done that, but it starts with us. We have to lift other women, and not just because she's a woman, just because, we need more people. We need to give them that time. So that is there. And of course, clearly a lack of role model. So that's again up to us. We take, we look higher, we look at the moon, we'll catch the sky. So at least more role models. You've got Sachin Tendulkar, and you see the kind of batsmen have, evolved in the country. So you probably get, we had Indra Nooyi. Indra Nooyi was sitting in the US. We need more Indra Nooyis in and yeah, there are some, but again, clearly that's not enough. So
Very, very,
again, a support system. That's it. Thank you.
Great points, Ruby. And on our part, we'll make sure that people in industry, in decision-making positions are taking note of this. Ruchi, your points?
So it is just not India. I will again quote an example, and I do not remember the tennis player as of now. He was asked that, how does it feel to be number one? He said, I am not number one. It is Venus Williams. So, it takes men because they're already there. We need more, we need their support, and we need to do more in the right direction. And I'll tell you why, because the field is like this. So when we are starting, when the level is so low, we need to do a little more to bring it at least at a level field for everybody. So, initially we might have to do a lot more, not a little more, but that should not bother anybody, because we are not there, we are very less, and we need more representation. You need people like us, me, but still it is less. So we need more men advocates, more men leader, also to be pro women, be pro conducive environments, and like Sadhika said, give a paternity leave also of 6 months, and then the cost of hiring is equal. I mean, then the cost of the person, a young guy getting married and probably his wife expecting is equal. So we will not have these challenges, and everything has to not in terms of gender neutral. I don't say that as a woman you take my strengths away, but in terms of efficiency level and judgments, that should be gender neutral. My gender, my being a mother, my being married, or me sitting anywhere, any part of the world, or my religion, or my caste, or my color, shouldn't play a difference. It just shouldn't play a difference. One more point is that bring in more awareness. I think that is what we lack. These are the challenges, not only in supply chain, but because we are so less that people feel, oh, there are no women, so maybe there must be something wrong. No, these challenges have been across the industry. Not that I'm saying that, I got a kindergarten for my kid very close to my office anywhere. I did get a 3-month maternity leave. That's all I got. And yes, I got it extended, but whatever was under the law, same thing is being provided here. If we need to change, we need to collectively change all across. It's just that we are less in numbers, so we are not voiced out as often. We need more platforms. We will bring those awareness, and we need more advocates, no matter which gender they are from. That's my 2 cents.
Powerful points as ever, Ruchi. Devi, your views?
So I think a lot of points have been covered, and I don't have anything additional, but for me, like some of the top points are training, mentoring, conditioning, in the entire process of recruitment, retention. So I think that's my topmost point. Second, like I said earlier, I think policy changes, creating, policies that are actually equal, keep having the same paternity and maternity policies. That's the second point. And third for me is, again, I'll resonate what my other co-panelists have said, is creating role models. I think it is important, even if you have to get somebody from outside the industry, but who brings in the relevant skills to be able to do the work and to be able to inspire. I think that's also okay. So it's important to create those role models. I think these are my top 3 points, Anand.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Devi. Now, this brings us to the end of the discussion. I've not taken any points because there were so many points to discuss among the panelists. Now, a message to the viewers who are watching this and who will be watching this. Ladies and gentlemen, whether you are a policymaker or a decision maker or an industrialist, a man or a woman, you need to take notes. You need to take note of this, because you may not realize it today, but if you do not improve, if you do not correct this situation, we are going to regret this, because there's been no country, no economy in the history of the world which has progressed, which has achieved a respectable level of quality of life without equal participation from women. That is the lesson, one of the very critical lessons that history teaches us. So please take notes, please improve the situation. And now my message, over to the panelists, is that you gave us your such valued time, and this was such a long discussion, but each and every point hammered the message home. So my hearty thanks to all the ladies on this panel. And I do want to say at the end of this discussion that for once in my life, I am so glad that I do only have to say ladies and not gentlemen, not because I don't want gentlemen on my panel, because this is a this is the only occasion that I've seen in my life where we had so much of women participation in the views. So thank you so much, ladies. You have a brilliant evening ahead. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you so much, Anand.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Take care. Bye-bye.